my powers, I will show you where they go. You like the wind, I'll tell you where it goes. Clean as you go, clean as you go, clean as you go, yeah. You need my energy, I'll show you where to go. You want the rivers, let me show you where they flow. Clean as you go, clean as you go, clean as you go. You want the highest building in your town. Where's my trees? I don't see them around here no more. Go to Mars, but
A lot of time has been spent lately on what I call the Hawaii project, where I'm looking at what it would take for Hawaii to phase out fossil fuels.
Oh yeah, that's
Now, the reason that this was being done is I've already done it for Finland. And the idea was to do it for each of the Nordic frontier states, like Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Iceland.
okay.
Now, I believe, for example, in the future that those Nordic countries will preferentially do business with each other and may even merge economically. But to do that, we need the planning data on the ground of what are the options. And that doesn't seem to exist. And so I was doing these reports. Iceland is the key because it's got geothermal. So much geothermal, it makes aluminium. So I wanted to actually have a test study that is far away from the Nordic frontier, that has different problems. Now, Hawaii is a closed system, and no one has to heat their homes to survive, but they've also got geothermal. So, yeah, and so that's why I'm doing it. Anyway, so one of the interesting things that is coming out of that is it's apparent that trucks, phasing out trucks and finding a replacement for them, is taking 80% of the energy post-fossil fuels. And that implies, should we actually reorganize society where we don't need to do what trucks do, which involves like radically changing things.
Radically.
So shall I tell you about Venus, the Venus Project?
Why not?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so the other thing I'm doing is after presenting my work many times to people in charge who should know better, the glassy-eyed, stunned mullet look that I would get coming back started to worry me. And every single one of those Muppets asked me what they should do, sorry. So they're asking me for a plan. And so after a while, it occurred to me that I was in a position to develop a plan, and they're not. And it occurred to me that they were really telling me that it can't happen inside the Western Hemisphere, in the Western world, and it can't be where any established system's already in place, because that system will fight for its own survival. And anything that is new that turns up, it will destroy. So I'm putting together a plan to get together a group of like-minded people and go and develop an innovation hub at this stage somewhere in South America. There are multiple sites around the world. The one in South America I like the best.
Okay.
And it will be an innovation hub that will develop a new energy paradigm.
Wow.
And it will also develop a new paradigm in how we grow our food. And the third front would be, well, now that we've got this new technology and a new kind of way of living, we're going to have a new social contract as well. The existing one's busted. Now,
Yeah.
what I'm doing there with this idea is I'm approaching this from an engineering problem. I'm going to start small, city of a couple of thousand people, establish certain technologies which will become a gateway, then open source them, and that'll set off a chain reaction in terms of, well, different things are now possible, and that actually moves the needle on how we respond. Right, and so I'm using my experience with the circular economy, my experience from the mining industry and actually managing feasibility studies. I'm using sort of context I'm merging the Venus Project was developed in the 70s by Jacques Fresco and Roxanne Meadows.
Yep.
And so I've taken their ideas and I've evolved them. I've added the ideas from the Club of Rome, where the limits to growth. We've also added the idea of some material constraints that have come from my work. The solution obviously will involve things like permaculture and regenerative agriculture. And so there's a whole lot of new ideas we're bringing together into one coherent plan. And if all goes well, that's my next professional step. So yeah, that's what my time has been consumed on. But today's topic, heat, that's come up on a multiple fronts fairly recently. So when we generate electricity, it's actually a heat economy. We make heat, turn water to steam, and that steam turns a turbine. But if we and so it's actually all along being heat. And when we phase out coal, heat is also used in manufacture, and we have no credible way of replacing coal yet. But there are some ideas on the books. But your question in particular relates directly to heating of buildings, civilian homesteads in particular.
Absolutely.
Right, and so the people around me, for example, have these ideas that believe the future it's going to be simple, right? And they think, oh, we'll just put heat pumps in.
Right.
But the people who are making those decisions don't really understand the logistical scale of issues of so many heat pumps, and that they're not going to do a very good job anyway. And so, and then there's things like the geothermal work that GTK has done, getting heat from the ground, and there's all sorts of things to talk about there. So anyway, so there's not enough time in the day.
There never is.
Everyone is my hide. There are so many opportunities around me at the moment. I can't keep up with them all. But I'm finding podcasts like this are actually very useful to me, because in describing my ideas, they are being refined. And people will listen to them and then give me feedback real time, saying, "Oh, yeah, you didn't get that right," or "That's not right," or and so in some podcasts, I'm sort of finding it's actually very useful. It's actually making sure that my craft, if you will, becomes better. So thank you.
Aw, you're welcome. I watch everything that you do with the group on Andre's channel, which I will put a link in the show notes. And, I learn, but you're a very good teacher in your descriptions of most everything. What I wanted to do was show this, because we had talked about this a little bit, the geothermics, and I thought maybe people would be a little bit interested in understanding some of this work. I know it's not your work, but what really was I read in the abstract, but in here, the geothermal reservoirs, a lot of people had talked about geothermal, like you were talking about, and here it is. Exploring deep geothermal resources in crystalline settings offers a promising solution for near unlimited clean energy across multiple spheres of society, including direct space heating.
So this is I work for the Geological Survey of Finland, and this paper was put out by some of my workmates. And so they're all this is good stuff. Now that statement is true, but you've got to put after it, it depends on the engineering.
Okay.
So
why I'm asking you.
Right. So what we've got here is below the surface, and we're sometimes we're talking about when they talk about a geothermal deposit, they're talking about a region of heat that's coming up from the magma of the mantle, and some of that heat gets quite close to the surface sometimes. And in the southern part of Finland, there is such a heat bulb. And there was a study that GTK did a few years ago, and the idea is you drill two holes. One hole you pour cold water in, or room temperature water in, it heats up, and then it comes back up, and it's heated water, and you take the heat and you use it. Right.
Water-centric.
Now, the problem here is to generate electricity, it needs to be about more than 100 degrees Celsius, and they like it about 110, 120. But even with modern heat pumps, the temperature that's coming out of these shallow wells, like anything less than a kilometer is considered shallow. Hang on, so what's that? Anything less than half a mile would be considered shallow in depth.
Ooh.
So the water that comes out is 50, 60 degrees Celsius.
Okay.
So it is not nearly hot enough to generate electricity, but it does have heat, and that heat can be used to heat buildings. Now, so they had an idea that they would drill 300-meter hole, deep holes, which is what, 1,000 meters, 1,000 feet, sorry,
Mm-hmm.
1,000 feet deep, and they would
You can
have
go
them.
meters. It's okay.
Okay, sorry, I don't do imperial very well. So
Don't.
300.
We want to change.
Okay, so they had like 300-meter deep holes, and they had like a grid. Say every 50 meters,
Mm-hmm.
like in a grid, they'd have one of these holes, and that would heat the city of Helsinki. Um, if they went 600 meters, it'd be more efficient, and the heat gets depleted over time, and it takes a while to recharge if you're taking more heat out than's been replenished. So you have to manage it correctly. If you do manage it correctly, it is indeed a source of energy that doesn't stop.
Wow. That's pretty
Right.
impressive.
But, so we're just talking about heating of buildings here. We're not talking about
Mm-hmm.
generating electricity, or because to generate electricity, you've got to go down to something like 3 or 4 kilometers in this sort of area, and sometimes deeper again. But it's not necessarily. So these heat reservoirs aren't everywhere. You've got to find them, right? And so it just so happens that GTK has found a few of them. And so we've got what this paper on the screen here is the mapping of a hot granite.
Okay.
A crystalline rock. A granite is made up of crystals of different minerals that have interlocked together, and thus, that's the data.
Phew, it's pretty wild.
So this is the bread and butter of GTK. This is the we're a scientific organisation, and this is the stuff we love to produce. And in fact, what you're looking at here is the stuff that they conventionally would rather produce, and my stuff's a little unusual for them. So yes, I'm doing unusual things. I'm in uncharted areas.
Yes, but that's what we need.
Yes, that's what we need, which is why they let me do it. But what you've got on the screen now is what they've been doing for the last century in one form or another.
The drilling. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the drilling and the mapping of the information that comes out and the interpreting it. So this is the world-class science stuff that they do. Anyway, so what they're doing is they're mapping the whole region, southern Finland, and as far north as they can get the heat reserves to go. And they're going to report, for example, companies could then say, oh, we'll set up a geothermal set of wells under every building in this region.
Oh.
And so we're talking about a lot of money to do it.
Yeah, of course.
The Finnish will happily take on a project like that, and they'll happily spend 50 years doing it, and they'll do it, and once it's done, they'll be the best in the world, because they have that kind of attention span. And they value maintenance, and they value design. But they also think in terms of communities, where they don't think of like a city block. They don't see like a city block full of individuals. They say, well, everyone in this city block needs blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And to live, and heating's one of them, and they've worked out that if we don't do the heating correctly, people die.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're right.
And so I am very impressed with the Finnish society in many respects. They're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, just like everywhere else, but they do have strengths to them that no one else seems to.
Well, we can learn. And you're very fond of Finland, which is where you live now. So, of course. And they could be the baseline for other countries to follow, especially, the colder countries, but even other countries. And like you're doing the Hawaii project also, which I've saw you talk about with the others. Okay. But of course, that's a warm environment.
Well, the problems are different.
Absolutely.
But what I found is this is a very tribal space. Everyone's got an idea, and they're part of a tribe, and that tribe has numbers. That tribe has concepts. So what I'm saying here is, we have plenty of energy. We're going to use wave energy, for example. We have all these wave generators, and that's our power. We don't need to do anything else. Go away. They said, oh, okay. And another group was like, oh, no, we're going to make biofuel out of everything. We've got lots of biomass here in Hawaii, so we're going to do all that. I said, oh, really? Okay, all right. Or another one is solar panels. Sun, put up some solar panels. Okay. So what I've done is, instead of saying one is better than the other, I've made a separate scenario for each one. Each one of them will say, all right, if we're going to power Hawaii completely with solar panels, what would that look like? Block. Or completely with wind turbines. Okay, that's how many wind turbines you need. Or if you were to actually sort of put up wave energy, so well, okay, now you need like an estimated 2,000 of these units, which means there's actually around the actual tidal flats there's going to be 7 for every mile. Yeah, and so all of these things work. It's when you need to scale them up to actually meet the system that's already there that things go sideways. So the idea of the Hawaii report is to put all information for all tribes into one place. Okay. So we can just say with numbers, this will work, this won't work. One scenario, for example, is the green transition. It's as dictated by the world, by the IEA and European Commission, 60-70% wind and solar, electric vehicles, hydrogen fuel cells. Okay, so if you were to map that onto the Hawaiian system, what would that look like? And then I do things like, well, to do that, you need so many charging stations. You need to have so many electric vehicles, so many hydrogen vehicles, with a split between the two. You need so many solar panels, so many wind turbines, and then you work, well, how much land area do you need to do that?
All of
and
it.
So there are limitations, like the island of Oahu, which is Honolulu. Mm-hmm. Right, let's say that's that. But the amount of space that you need for solar panels is about that. And so it's depending on the scenario, it really does sort of show like that the limitations of what's involved. And the scenario I'm writing at the moment is if we were to apply the ideas of the Club of Rome, and if we were to hit degrowth and reduce it by 70%. So we're now about 30% of the original system, and you were to go to non-fossil fuels using the green transition, how many solar panels are we talking about? And the answer is still scary.
Yeah, it's not an all of the all or nothing. It's not all or nothing, but it's all of the above.
Yeah. And so I've also coined this idea called the purple transition. Okay. The green transition won't work, but the purple transition might. I've found some technologies that might be able to help us out of this. And there's 3 primary ones. And so I put them together, and so these are all other systems will still be there in some form, but the 3 dominant ones that empower everything else, and they're all unorthodox. But there's documentation to show that they're real. They are liquid fuel fission using thorium as the fuel. They are internal combustion using ammonia as the fuel, not hydrogen, ammonia. Mm-hmm. And the third one is the burning of iron powder to replace coal, because it actually has a very high temperature heat that comes from that. And so these technologies are new, they're not very well understood, and things that will come with them, and some things need to be developed. Mm-hmm. But they're the only things on the books that look like they might make a difference.
And might make a difference without burning carbon, for the most part?
Yep. So liquid fuel fission, there's no carbon at all. Burning of iron, no carbon. In fact, you're actually adding oxygen to iron powder. So the only waste plume off that is any contaminants that actually might be in the iron powder. So there's nothing there. Ammonia is it's not healthy for humans to come in contact with it, and you need to have it compressed in a 300 bar tank to be useful. But once you actually get past that, Toyota have released a ammonia fueled passenger car concept. They're not in production yet, but they're going to do it. And they've got a series of catalytic converters that actually manage the waste plume, so the gas that comes off that is not hazardous. I think you've got nitrogen, and you've got what's the other one? You got 2 separate gases of nitrogen and oxygen, but they don't combine together. Something like that. Electric vehicles won't. They work just fine, but the trouble comes when you're trying to scale them up. And you can make them out of other materials, like fluoride or sodium or something like that, but they will also need copper and nickel and graphite.
Of course, lots of mining.
Which is all as a problem at the moment. hydrogen also works, but the trouble comes when you've got to make large amounts of hydrogen, store it and transport it. And that's where things fall down for that. And so Toyota actually picked up my work in late 2021, and they contacted me and they said, look, what's all this about? And I recommended that they go off and check a few things themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I sent a few hypotheses to them, and as far as I know, they did that. And I got a communication a few months later saying, yeah, correct. This is conceptually correct. And anyway, so what they are worried about is not just the material constraints, but the fact that the Chinese control everything, and they want to get out from under the Chinese influence and have their value chain somewhere else. Yeah, but everyone collectively wants to sit down and wait for the end and wants to complain at each other instead of actually doing problem solving.
And you are a problem solver.
Yeah, so instead of actually sort of talking to people who don't want to hear, what I am going to do is round up a group of like-minded people and actually go and do some of this stuff and prove it to be true. Or prove it doesn't work and then move on to the next one. There are thousands of ideas we could try. Literally thousands.
And I say, why not? Because if we do nothing, we are just actually putting more nails in the coffin and watching the ship go down. I mean, I don't know. It's very easy for people to say, okay, WASF and why bother? But people are always going to try. There's no way to stop it. I'm not going to be able to say, well, I think the techno-utopians are crazy. They should stop. Nobody's going to stop. That's not human nature to stop. So people like you are looking for, I don't know if I want to necessarily say solutions. We're looking for changes.
So
the ship is not down yet.
So a lot of the techno-cornucopians are crazy. A lot of the that they put forward are contingent on things working as they are now, and which, a lot of them are ecologically irresponsible.
So Simon, how can ordinary people feel like they are part of something like the Venus Project, that they have a stake in it?
Okay, so this is starting out as we've started as a private company with a job to do to develop technology, but a lot of it is how do we use that technology? So we've got to gather a lot of money to do this. We're talking about, in the end, between 5 and 10 billion. And so we are talking about a lot, depending on the feasibility studies. There comes a point when we're doing crowdfunding in the beginning to get us going. Okay. When we get to what's called the scoping study level, we've got to manage thousands of ideas and funnel them into feasibility study space. Now, we can't just ask an engineering company to do it because they're all conventional. Ask a conventional group that would get a conventional answer. There'll be a call to arms for people who are engineers and architects and scientists to help us discuss amongst ourselves, like in a series of groups, preferably face-to-face. And if we've got the money, I'm going to fund people's flights and accommodations so we can all gather in one place to do it. To try and sort of work out how do we actually get these ideas to fit together, and which series of ideas should be sent into scoping studies and pre-feasibility studies. To get a multi-billion-dollar capital funding project going, they're going to want formal feasibility studies. Sure. But they've got to be organised, and so we need help on that. So that's one way they could interact, and that's coming. Once these things are actually on the ground and developing, there'll be a real-time link between us and everyone that we are talking to for ideas to be flowing out to the rest of the world. What works, what doesn't. And in fact, people paying attention to what we're doing is actually one of the ways that we're going to protect ourselves. If something dodgy happens, it won't happen in a vacuum and everyone's watching. Good. Right? So we're very interested in actually connecting with ordinary people. Once we get some ideas on the ground that are working, the next thing to do is to help people understand why they're working and why they're better than what's happening now. And so there'll be a whole series of podcasts like this one, actually, where we're talking to people. Good. What the average person could do then is, first of all, understand what they're looking at, and if they agree, to actually sort of spread that information on social media or whatever is at the time that is similar. And that has the effect of changing how people think, that understanding what options are actually in front of them. And then you've got the option of doing things. At the moment, there is no option. There's just, we do things the way we do them now, and that's it. Right? And so this project won't happen in a vacuum.
Okay.
And we will need, at a grassroots level all over the world, people to discuss and talk about this.
And coin it the Purple New Deal.
So the purple transition is
transition, right.
an idea I presented to the British Embassy, and they laughed. And the British Embassy group in Finland. So they laughed, but it was a series of ideas of how we could get off fossil fuels.
Yeah.
The green transition won't work. No. What if we, because of the ideas put forward, aren't going to work at scale? That's the problem, where the commodities industry has not really been thought of. If I put forward some ideas that might work, and I just call it the purple transition.
I like it. It's catchy. People like labels, Simon. They like labels. They like a name to something. They want to hang on. The Purple New Deal, the Purple Transition. Hey, that's good.
So everyone had a laugh at that. One guy in the audience was, that sounds like a sexual minority.
For God's sakes.
And I blurted out, we need to find you a girl, mate. Perhaps you should edit that out.
People are crazy.
No,
anyway, I'm not editing that out. It's funny.
Anyway, so once an idea takes hold, what's interesting is when other groups around me sort of take my ideas but don't necessarily acknowledge that my work exists. I've seen that happen a couple of times now. That's just part and parcel of this space. If I want to actually initiate change, then get that idea out there. I'm just developing something new so fast that I'm already moving on to the next frontier. So anyway, so that's all that's happening at the moment on multiple fronts. But I want to move out from the space of being the guy in the corner with a cardboard sign saying the end is nigh. But I want to be part of the solution. Solution set. What was it? Do you know? Here's a chemistry joke for you.
Okay.
You're either part of the solution or part of the precipitate.
Chemistry. Okay. The seeds of life happen in chemistry. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so yes. Things are moving along, and we've got lots of problems to solve all at once, and we're in this haphazard space at the moment because we haven't thought things through. What I've noticed, for example, in Australia, we're great at starting things, but not very good at finishing them. Right, and so we often use magical thinking to actually sort of make plans for the future, and because everything's so easy in Australia, we don't really. And so, yes, and so hopes and dreams and unicorn rainbows and all that sort of stuff. Where it was here in Finland, they're not very good at starting things. They don't necessarily like taking the initiative on their own. They like to do things in groups, and it means that it's very difficult to get things going. But if it's important, they'll have these endless bloody meetings. And it gets to the point where no one can remember who started the idea, and that's when it's ready to go forward, right? So then they'll have this sort of consensus sort of thing happening. It takes a long time to get going. But then they'll put a plan on the ground that might be 50, 60 years long in execution, and then 50, 60 years later, it's done.
I got a question.
Yeah.
50, 60 years.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have 50, 60 years, Simon?
Not as such in a lot of these issues that are on the table. Look, I used to work with an Aboriginal guy in Australia. I haven't seen him in years. His name was Willie, in a town called Emerald in central Queensland. And he was one of the blokes that used to, work at one of the petrol stations. He had this saying, white man don't know what white man doesn't know. But pain is a great teacher.
All right. Pain is a great teacher.
So
But
no,
none
yeah.
of these things are going to stop the ice from melting in the Arctic or the glaciers from gushing or all that. And that's where we focus a lot of our energy is understanding what's happening. And in fact, Jim Massa and I just did a show on all of the schemes for refreezing the ice. And we tend to be a bit skeptical, although I'm more open-minded because, again, as I said earlier, these technological ideas are going to turn into, and they already are, into projects and ultimately will get funded when the shit hits the fan bad enough.
So what that means is things will be done on a small scale, and everyone will just try and adapt best they can.
Yeah.
But study the natural world, working in the Geological Survey, and what one of the things you can sort of say there is change is a constant, and the planetary environment is actually in the process of finding a new equilibrium, right? And so change. Um, our human systems may struggle to function through all that, which means they will contract in size,
Yeah.
right? And so we've had glaciers melt before, and so that then once the human imbalance has been resolved one way or another, then the planetary environment will adjust to a new bioshift again after that, and it'll go into whatever phase it is going forward. What I'm sort of saying here is, from an Earth systems point of view, in the context of James Lovelock's ideas, where everything's a system,
Yeah.
the planetary system will change. We don't have the time, I suppose, to do things properly, which means that organisations like the stock market is about to sort of, it's in deeper shit than usual. So
Really.
in a century's time, for example, how many of the systems around us will still exist, and something else will have to either be take their place, or what the human enterprise will be off somewhere else doing something entirely different. The planet knows exactly what it's doing because it's done this many times before. We don't.
Nope.
Whose problem was that really?
I would imagine it's ours. Yeah.
Right. So what I was supposed to say is the human species is now running at 8 billion population and rising. Right. The vast majority of those people won't engage in a lot of the ideas. They just don't want to know. How do you think you're going to go on a problem you don't work on? And so badly. Right.
Yeah.
So instead of actually trying to find a solution for 8 billion people, I'll find a solution for a small number of like-minded people, and then once we've actually got some sort of stability in a new direction, then we can start talking about sort of moving into larger groups. And until then, the people who don't want to know might well just Darwinize themselves.
Okay. The people that don't want to know are very prevalent in the United States,
Well,
obviously.
all over the world,
Ah,
it's difficult to think without these things. And it's all right, it's a free country. You can think what you want. Um, but the human species, I believe, will survive. Right, it'll just be in a different form.
oh, sure. And a lot smaller. Because
Yep.
I mean, we are not 8 billion plus. There are people that will argue with us about overpopulation and say it's not a problem, but it is a problem. But the solution is not genocide. The solution is not nefarious. The solution is empowerment of women and changing viewpoints, which is not easy. It's not easy, especially in the religious world where, it's a given just to keep procreating, procreating, procreating.
You're talking about a different social contract,
There's
right? And
many.
and if all attempts to try and sort of fix that in the past haven't done very well, and so I put forward the idea of a game theory lab in my innovation hub, where we're going to look at lots and lots and lots of different ideas and simulate them over a 500-year time frame to see which are stable and which are not, and that'll try and tell us what is it we need to do. And we're trying to capture that rage that I just heard in your voice.
The rage. Well, I don't know if it's rage or if it's just there's some anger, I guess. I suppose. Yeah, you pegged it.
So, so I believe this is the era where the gloves will come off and the veil will lift, and the true struggle of our age will become apparent. And it's not man versus woman, or it's not between religions. It's between the very, very rich and everyone
Oh,
else.
absolutely. Oh,
Right.
I made a video called "Bunker Babies" about all those elitist, wealthy people that think that they're going to just go into a bunker and everything will be hunky dory. No, you are spot on right there. I can't argue at all about that.
Yeah. And so the problem with sitting in a bunker is your thinking atrophies. Whereas if you've got to sit on the surface with the rest of the humans, right, you are forced to problem solve through
Hmm.
this, and change will be more lasting because you've actually had to work really hard for it. If you're sitting in a bunker, your thinking will definitely be part of another time that's no longer useful.
No, I don't think they're useful now. These people.
Right? So, yeah. Anyway, so what I was just saying is these solutions are feel good, but they're short term,
Yeah.
right? And if you want them to be sustainable and strong over like a period of say 40, 50 years from now, then you have to seriously think about, are they that useful? And is running away from pain really what we need to do right now? You know, we shouldn't be afraid of hard work, and we shouldn't be afraid of facing some hard choices, because choices are what got us here. And if we do abdicate responsibility to that, what does that suggest with regard to the tasks for the next generation? What are they? What sort of world are they handed?
Yeah,
So,
nothing. Exactly. I feel the same way. We need it's not good enough to just sit back and do nothing. It's just but I don't think it's ever been and there are those that are going to like you say.
and this is my plan.
That's so cool. The Venus evolution. I'm proud of you. I think it's really innovative that there are people like you that are looking at all of these things that need to be discussed and need to be brought out in the forefront. You know, certainly a lot of countries aren't. In the United States, we're just fighting over the stupidity of a potential civil war. I mean, where is that going to lead us? We need to move
Look on the bright side.
beyond. What's the bright side?
Here in Europe, we can't agree on the color of an orange.
Oh,
And so, yes, so to excuse my French, but we've lined ourselves up for a good, what was it, a good rogering next time Mr. and Mrs. Spank me go to Bot Land. You know, we're in trouble.
you're funny. Yeah, we're in trouble. Well, we could agree on an orange here in the United States. We agree that Donald Trump is orange. That's about all we agree on.
So
Oh,
the net position of the United States is actually much stronger than Europe because the industry that was in the United States was there and operating not that long ago, and you can restart it up again. There's a lot of natural resources left in the United States that
mm,
are not really in Europe, and you don't have the population pressures. So the problems that you've got in the United States are largely human systems, right? So once you get that resolved, and you get back to the work when it's understood what it is you need to do, it is actually possible to you'll be in like a gold rush, wild west sort of environment where there'll be like a rapid rebuilding of things once everyone understands what's going on. But at the moment, people are arguing about shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic
yeah, there
without
you
real.
go.
They can just make a new lifeboat. Off you go.
All right,
So,
new lifeboat.
yeah.
That's okay. Interesting.
So hemp is a fiber-based product. Hemp is there's a drug called marijuana that everyone you smoke. This is industrial hemp that doesn't have the part you smoke in
Right.
concentrated things. So it's you can actually sort of grow hemp without being taking part of the drug industry, so to speak. Uh, it's an amazingly resilient fiber. It doesn't require a lot of water to grow, which is why I'm considering it for my Venus project ideas.
Okay.
So I can now uh, many thousands of products can be made from hemp, and it's really efficient. We used to make paper out of hemp, for example, and textiles and cloth, and then the paper
Yeah.
industry came in, and hemp was lobbied to be shut down.
Unreal.
And it went this. It's like when train stations, the trains as a transport system and as a business, they were bought out by the companies that were bringing in ICE, internal combustion petroleum engines,
Mm-hmm.
and they shut them all down, and everyone had to buy a car. So it's money.
Yeah. There you go.
This is
Money.
right. So this is what's hemp is not really. You can grow it; it's legal to grow and everything, but it hasn't been accepted by society or industry yet because there are a lot of legislative hoops to jump through. My plan is to set up a hemp-based value chain from the very beginning to the very end, as in saleable products, right, outside the Western world. And once we get to the point where the restraints are taken off that, what might come from that? Now, there is no magic bullet as such, but there are things that are highly useful, and hemp is one of them. It can be used in many, many different things.
Absolutely.
The question is, can enough hemp be grown in a form where it can be gotten out to enough people
Yeah.
to make it useful? So, transition-wise, I see it as a way of doing things that is useful. What could come from it remains to be seen. I don't know, but I would like to find out. So peak oil is the idea that we haven't run out of oil. It's just our ability to increase production and bring it to the market peaks and starts to decline. So it's a volume thing. Each year we bring more to the market. Now, oil was the primary energy system behind our society for the last century.
Mm-hmm.
And so oil production was energy. Energy was physical work. Physical work was economic output. So the ability to grow was linked to oil. And so the problem with peak oil is if we're still attached to it, and we certainly still are, and petroleum products, when it peaks and declines, our economic systems will peak and decline. However, things have changed in the last 10, 15 years, especially since the GFC. For a start, economic value has now been subject to financial instruments like printing of money and derivatives market. And so the finance sector has decoupled from the physical sector, the reality world. And so economic value can now be made up. We're living off the equivalent of living off our credit card because we're just printing more money,
Yeah.
which is fine in a short term, but what we're actually doing is devaluing that money over time. So we're heading towards a currency reset by doing that. Peak oil also has evolved. Now, in 2005, there was a peak of crude oil and things plateaued out. I think later in 2011, when you include tar sands, there was another peak, but there was like an undulating plateau as well. But ever since then, it's gone down. What's happened is an evolution of horizontal drilling
Yes.
has happened, which facilitated the idea of what we call fracking, where they drill into the reserve and they put some explosives and they crack or frack that environment, and then they pack it full of sand and water to open the cracks up, which facilitate the flow of more oil and gas. This works in low-grade oil deposits. So what they've done is opened up low-grade deposits. That has since, in the United States, in the tight oil sector, which fracking is what that is, has become 96% of the growth of the new growth that's come online for oil production since 2008. So what we call fracking in the tight oil sector is supporting the entire world as it's expanding. Now, as we're bringing on more population, more and more people need more and more oil products, and we are still dependent on oil products in particular. Now, so this is the problem we're finding. In 2018, in November 2018, what we call crude oil did in fact peak and decline. But what we call peak oil now has to evolve, because what we put in a gasoline tank in the car, drive it around, now comes from several sources. Biofuels are now stepping up. And we've also got an innovation in the gas industry where natural gas liquids are being used to make gasoline. Right, so total liquids is starting to recover. We're very close to the point where we can pass the 2018 peak. Not quite there yet, but they think we're going to do it. But we are forcing serious inefficiencies in the gas industry to prop this up,
Oh
and
boy.
we are dependent on ever-increasing in biofuels, which has its own problems as well.
Yeah.
That is all good and well for gasoline and jet fuel. It is not very good, like it doesn't help us with diesel and bunker fuel, which is the heavier fuels.
Mm-hmm.
Diesel is the problem. Diesel runs Alice Friedemann wrote a book called When Trucks Stop.
I
Right.
have
In
the
fact,
book. Yeah.
yeah, she'd be a useful person on the
She's
podcast.
fascinating.
Yeah. So
Okay.
When Trucks Stop. Also, yeah, and so that decline in crude oil has declined and looks like it's not coming back. So I think we have actually seen peak oil, and it's now it's now more than 5 years ago. But we are now propping up the system with other things that are not very efficient.
Right.
It's a bullet on a band-aid wound. So sorry, a band-aid on a bullet
A
wound. There you go.
band-aid on a bullet wound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Ouch.
it's a temporary solution is the situation we're in, and we think we're going to grow our way out of our current circumstances when it's looking like Art Berman, by the way, has done some excellent work on understanding how the state of the U.S. oil industry in
Yes.
particular.
I've seen him on Nate Hagen's podcast.
Yeah, it also
Nate's
does
doing
some.
phenomenal work. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, what we call peak oil, I believe, has already happened, but we are covering up and kicking the can down the road by using other things. But those other things are not as stable as we would like to think.
We sure are.
That's right. That's great. Um, there's going to come a point when we can't keep expanding, but the system has to expand because of financial requirements. Now, then there's going to be a problem when we're going to start to step down and decline a little. And the way the current system is, that's going to be a problem. We will have to adjust ourselves economically for contraction instead of growth for the first time ever. And that, I believe, is imminent because if peak oil really was 4 or 5 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
we are still dependent on systems like tight oil. Things like there's a number of basins in the United States tight oil sector, and the Permian Basin is by far the most productive.
Mm-hmm.
All other basins have been in decline, and the Permian is the only one that's been increasing.
Mm.
So everything comes down to the entire planet in growth of oil to the Permian Basin in the United States.
Yeah. Boom. One
Right.
place. Yep.
So a analysis has been put forward. This has come from Art that suggests that the Permian Basin may not be able to do that for much longer, and there is no other play on the planet that is able to increase the way we want to increase.
Mm.
Right. So I guess what I'm saying is if we've already seen peak oil, that's one thing, but the signatures of peak oil haven't appeared the way we thought. But then again, you could say for the last 5, 6 years, there's been one damn thing after another. Right. And in a complex system, which everything is connected to everything else, you can't predict what actually will break down. And I think that's what we're seeing. So we may well be seeing the post-peak oil world for the last couple of years, but we just haven't understood what we're looking at.
Some people did years ago, saw this writing on the wall, but they weren't listened to enough.
Well, now we're back to 8 billion people. Only a
Yeah.
few will talk about this.
Yeah. 8 billion people.
Yeah. So
I think the young people need to learn all about these things. The younger generations definitely essentially need to learn about what peak oil was, what is actually happening. It's very important.
So a group of people we call young, let's say under the age of 15 or under the age of 20, I think was.
Yeah.
They are across a lot of these things, and they're talking about it, but they're doing it in languages that, in ways that older generations don't quite understand. Things like social media.
Yeah.
They're able to communicate in ways that I'm a Gen X. I'm 50, right? And so when my
You're a
16-year-old,
baby.
a baby, right?
Yes.
Still on my nappies. But so when my 16-year-old daughter goes, I'm just going to use this social media app. I'm going, yeah, okay, and straight over the head. Uh, uh, but it turns out 40% of Generation Z have spent money on what you might call prepper stuff. They've actually spent money on equipment and food stores and things like that in case things get difficult. That's a much higher percentage than the rest of the population.
Although I have that too. I grow all my own vegetables and
Right.
can. I got jars and jars of food and all that.
So how many people our age would be like that? Like most of the people around me would look at me like a poleaxed hobbit if I suggested such actions. Why would you think of that?
Yeah,
Um,
well, I thought of
yeah,
it. But I'm, one of those. I see the writing on the wall.
yeah. So a small number of people did so. That number is growing.
Oh, yeah, it is.
But the people who control our society and control our media are not interested in discussing these ideas
No.
or propagating what we might do about them. And so, as far as you can tell by watching the 6 o'clock news, um,
No, they're brain dead. And
yeah,
that's corporate media anyway. I know
yeah,
people, the mass media that people consume is certainly not giving them reality at all, at all. And I'm afraid that we may lose that ability to communicate like we are right now in the United States. I do worry about it. It can happen. There is the movement. I don't think people realize how serious it could be if it happens. And there you go. We lose it.
so
Take,
what you would fall back on is the good old-fashioned postal system,
yeah,
and you
there you
less
go.
communication of higher quality between community groups.
This is the next step.
Hmm.
I mean, even if the Arctic's melting, even if we see these horrible weather patterns, these things are going to happen. People like you are innovative and pushing for that change, but you're pushing for it in the right way where we see hemp usage, where we see scaling down, where we see economic systems have to change. So I'm with you there.
Yeah. So, and it's a case of let's give it a go and see what happens.
Yes. What do we have? Like I said, what do we have to lose but everything? So thank you. I really, really appreciate you being with me. It's always a pleasure. You're animated and you're fun. And I hang on every word because it's so interesting. So I tell everybody, please follow Simon, and I'll put some links in to where you can see him in other podcasts, and some links I'll put in for Nate's show and Ari Berman, and so people can learn and enlarge your thinking, change your thinking if you're stuck. There.
Indeed.
Well, thank you. Come again.
You're welcome. See you next time.
I hope so.
You want the highest building in your town. Where's my trees? I don't see them around it no You wanna more. Go to Mars, but the soil is full of mercury. Keep my water clean, free from PVC. How many pieces of plastic in the Tennessee River? I hope this makes you see things clearer.